This video will be on the tips for teaching yoga flows to students with dementia or Alzheimer's. We're going to go over some of the background and a specific method that I have found helpful, as well as some tips, some practical tips that can help you be as successful as a therapist or as a yoga instructor for these types of students. A little bit of background on dementia. It is a progressive disease that can affect the memory, attention, communication, reasoning, judgment, problem-solving skills of an individual. Currently, there are about 5 million Americans, according to the CDC, that have some form of dementia today, but it's expected to increase pretty rapidly within the next few years. Recent studies have suggested that yoga can reduce stress and improve memory function as well as cognitive functioning, and can be beneficial for caregivers as well. As the memory and cognition are impacted through this disease, we as instructors or therapists should be mindful that the student may not receive the practice in the way that we had initially intended it or wrote it out. So in this manner, we should remember to be adaptable and patient to see if and how they benefit from the practice. And additionally, for caregivers, we can really impact their coping skills for everything that they're going through mindfulness strategies, and as well as a few physical practices. I like this quote by Penny Garner, who said, "The desire to do yoga has to come from within the student. They should be the ones to say, after being introduced to it, I want to go back to that for more of what I had." So we should be giving them a feeling that they want to return to, not something that they are dreading. Okay, next let's talk about the SPECAL Method, which is by Penny Garner. I found this information on Yoga International, which is a journal resource that provides a lot of information on a variety of health conditions and treatment interventions with yoga. Specifically, this was not intended to use only for yoga. It can be used as an approach technique for a variety of different interventions for those with Alzheimer's. Her intentions were to create a practical and effective approach that can be used during these treatment interventions. Mrs. Garner uses the photograph album analogy to explain her method in treating those with dementia. This photo album is something that we all have built over the course of our lives through emotional instances and factual information. We have stored pictures that we can relate to during times in our life. However, with the loss of memory, a new type of photograph emerges that has no facts relating to what just occurred in their lives, but has all the associated feelings. They will thus turn to other photos to make sense of their feelings. So she goes on to give a few practical tips to work alongside dementia instead of against it. Okay, so here are a few practical tips for instructors and therapists as we approach the treatment interventions. The first one is to not ask direct questions, which is quite hard for me, and I'm sure other therapists and yoga instructors, because we're often quite outgoing and trying to build rapport with our patients pretty quick, and it can be kind of awkward to not have a natural flow of conversation. But with direct questions like, "How is your morning?" or "Would you like to do child's pose now?" could cause the student with dementia to become more aware of their lack of factual information. And then, life can become quickly complicated for both the student and instructor. It is, however, necessary to continue to engage our students in conversation, which is how Mrs. Garner brings up the questionless question technique, in which we can say, "I wonder if it might be nice to do child's pose now," instead of saying, "Let's go into child's pose now." So instead, we create this invitational language by saying things like, "Maybe we could ... inviting participation without putting a student with dementia on the spot. Number 2 seems quite simple, but has really impacted my view on approaching this, and it's just to listen and learn from the student. Quite often, I will find myself just coming into the natural flow of explaining a yoga sequence when in reality I need to shut up and listen. So often, these students will drop little nuggets of information or insights into how they are feeling that day that we can pick up on and use throughout our flow to impact them more beneficially. Additionally, we can consult with their caregivers or their children or their nurses, their doctors, to see what they often talk about, see what they like, describe important times in their lives that they bring up a lot that maybe you could also use in your time with them to build rapport. Maybe that can be something that they remember, like a trip, or hold near and dear to their heart. But yeah, listening to them can be very beneficial in their treatment. Our third tip is just to not contradict our students. So as stated previously, Alzheimer's and dementia can present in a variety of different ways, but for some, they may blatantly say incorrect statements that relate to our flow, like we haven't done our breathing exercises yet, or you forgot to do our shoulder rolls. And even though this can cause a little bit of frustration, let's just remember to take a deep breath, be patient, and remember our goal. So let's just follow along with them. It can't do any wrong to do those things again, especially if that was something that made them happy. Next, we have to provide more demonstrations and gestures rather than mainly verbal cues. And although verbal cues are often greatly helpful for other students, such as alignment cues or like visual cues during alignment techniques, instead of having a couple sentences describing how the student should look, maybe we can just say plug the feet into the floor and then dramatically mimic what you're trying to get them to do. Next, we have give only good news. So I liked the example that was used in Yoga International, which was, if you had a rough time getting to work that day, don't respond to, like, how has your morning been by, oh, the traffic was terrible and this person had extreme road rage behind me and blah, 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 like creating this feeling of anxiety. Instead, let's just give good news about our day, making them feel happy about our visit and not have this sense of an unexplained anxiety that they can't relate to. The next few is quite simple to explain. It's just to be generous with praise. So we want to give our students all of the verbal positive feedback that we can, saying, wow, you're really good at this, perfect, you're doing amazing, blah, blah, blah. It's important to be authentic here and for them to genuinely believe that you are proud of them for their efforts and commend them, but also be sincere at the same time. Our next step is to use inclusive language. So this is using terms like, let's come into downward dog pose. We're going to begin our breathing exercises today. Instead of saying things like, your toe needs to be turned out to the right more, we could say, let's turn our feet out to the corner of our mat. Using this language that includes you and the student as well, so you're not isolating them out and you're giving this authoritative feel to your instructions. Next, we have being adaptable and patient. So let's just be understanding that some days will be better than others and adapting to their presentations for that day. So understanding and accepting the fact that a lot of the flows that we come up with will not work, and then staying on our toes, bringing out that occupational therapist or physical therapist in us to be adaptable, and then patient to find out what works. Our last step is to learn to love repetition. So after we find what works for them on a day-to-day basis, learning to repeat this time and time again, maybe finding what makes them happy or what makes them laugh and laughing with them, giving them an overall joyful experience about your flow today, and then repeating that, giving them some consistency in their lives. If they remember something of what you did recently, just all together flowing along with their personality and their practice. So that's all. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I hope it helps.